What's up, guys? This is the Dirt Bike Channel podcast. I am your host, Kyle Brotherson. We are going to be talking about riding with kids today. I'm super excited about this topic we're going to cover. I'm going to bring on Scott Robeson here, and we are going to chat. We're two guys that have kids and love to ride with our kids, and so we thought, you know what, we'll talk about a little bit about what it takes to get your family out riding, and talk about the different bikes you should do and the different expectations you should have, and just give you some thoughts for all those dads out there that are thinking about riding with their kids, and cover some of those topics. So I think it should be a good thing. I get a lot of email on this type of deal, and so I'm just going to ring up Scott, and we're going to have a chat about this. Give me 1 second here.
Hey, Kyle. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Scott?
Good. Good to talk to you again.
Good. Is this still an okay time to chat about this?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. I've got my recording software and everything going. I had a busy morning, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I can hear you crystal clear. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you really good.
Awesome. I've got a bunch of thoughts, and a lot of the things that you said in your initial email to me, I printed both of them out. They really resonated with me, you know.
Yeah.
And then I read through kind of like your, you know, the writing that you do with your kids and your saga. I feel like we have quite a lot of things in common. We're about the same age.
Yeah,
you know?
we're like the same age. I think you're like a year older than me, maybe.
Yeah.
And you know, it's fun. I've been watching Dirt Bike Channel for a couple of years now. You're actually how I discovered YouTube, really.
Okay.
So and when I watched your earlier Dirt Bike Channel episodes, I'm just like, this guy is just like me. This is just, he's out riding for fun, just having a good time, loves dirt bikes, riding dirt bikes. And I don't know. I connected with Dirt Bike Channel. I'm
cool.
like, yeah, that's what and so when I've watched you ride with your kids, and it just reminds me what it's like when I'm riding with kids, you know.
Right on.
And I saw the one video where the one's riding off and the other one's stuck there, and you're like, wait a minute, he's riding off and I can't talk to him, he can't hear me, and I don't know where he's at.
Yeah.
You're like, it's stressful. Like, you want to be out there having fun and you're stressed. And I saw that come through on the video, and I'm like, yes, that is what riding with kids is like.
Yeah, no, totally.
And I grew up riding in the little circle in my backyard, just wishing that I could go ride. You know, that my dad would have taken us out and go riding. And, you know, and I had no idea that I'm like, wow, when you're the dad following kids, there's a lot to this. There's a lot goes into it behind the scenes. It's a lot of work to get them out there. And so anyways, so I just thought it would be so fun to hear you elaborate more on what it's like to ride with your boys.
Well, and I think it'll be interesting for us to kind of riff on this, because we're not the only dads that are doing this. I go out riding with, you know, I've got a couple other buddies that I'll go ride with their kids, and it's a lot of work.
It's all work.
It's so much work, but then at times it gets really, really rewarding. But you have to put in a lot of times, and another thing, and so we'll get into this. We'll get into like picking correct bikes for the kids and things. But just to kind of set the stage, what Scott is talking about here is just that this is going to be a lot of work, and you don't want to do this unless you are passionate about dirt bikes. And so I think a lot of guys are, but then the other, you know, because you're gonna do a lot of work, and you've got to have that passion. The flip side of that is, though, you don't want to be too passionate to where you make it not fun for the kids. The number one priority for every ride that we go on, then I tell my kids this, is to have fun. Obviously safe, you know, we want to be safe, but I think that's a given. So we want to be safe, but then we want to have fun. And then after that, I want the kids to grow just a little bit. I want them to be pushed a little bit. Not so much that it makes it unfun, because if you put them on the wrong bike, which we'll get into, or you push them to do things that they don't want to, or that they're really, really scared about, it's okay to have them do something that they're scared about. But it shouldn't be that the entire thing is just fear and fright. And you know, it's good to set the stage every time with, hey, we're going to have fun. And if you make sure that when you go, you're telling the kids we're going to have fun, and you come back, and as you're on your way back, you kind of do a almost like a follow-up discussion with them and just say, hey, did you have fun? What did you like? What did you not like? And just make an open dialogue with them. I think it's going to go a long ways, you know?
Yeah. And I think, Kyle, we're out there to have fun. We are out there to have fun. And I got to remind myself that. I'm probably the one I got to remind the most is me. Because when we go out and, let's say you and I are going to go on a ride together, okay? I'm not worried about Kyle. I'm not worried about you. I know you can hold your own. You're fine. I can lead sometimes. Sometimes I'll lead, and we're out there having fun. When you take your kids out and you're riding, you got to keep an eye on them. You got to watch them and make sure they're okay. And you're kind of keeping track of everybody. So one of the notes I had wrote to you was lower your expectations of how much riding you're really going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think going out there, knowing that when you're on a ride with kids, it's a different ride than when you're with your buddies. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so I think for me, it's like I knew that, but I had to learn it at the same time. Because there were times where we'd go out, and I think what's easy for me that I could do all day, like what might be a little loop that I could just ride. The boys might have one of those in them. And not being frustrated that we can't do more. Yeah, we drove all this way, or we're out here camping and we only rode for a little bit. And now we're sitting around. And so.
Yeah. So let's talk, and I totally agree. And I totally agree on that. Let's talk about picking the right bike for the kid or kids. This is a tricky one for me because I get these emails. If it doesn't happen every day, it's at least every other day. Somebody says, hey, what bike should I get for my kid? And honestly, the email that I probably get the most is, what bike should I get? And I don't know how old the people are, and so they're like, hey, what bike should I get? And so I kind of have a canned response, which I send back to people. And I'm almost more comfortable saying that, like, hey, you're an adult man or whatever. Here's 8 or 9 bikes you can go look for. When they're talking about their kids, which I get almost as often, what bike should I get? I mean, we have some starter bikes we can get into when they're really, really young, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you get into these weird ranges because the kids are so different. They hit these growth spurts, or they're, a little bit shorter, a little bit bigger. I have known 12-year-old kids that are bigger than me, yet I have a 12-year-old son who's like 70 pounds and is still riding, just like a 65 two-stroke and stuff. But so keep in mind, anyone who's listening to this, you need to take all this stuff with a grain of salt because every kid is so different. I've got 4 kids that are all completely different. What's
so fun about, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to say, this is one of the topics, Kyle, that I was really looking forward to talking to you about, because I think you and I have taken a little different angles on this, and I feel like they're both right. And what's fun is I really want to hear your perspective on this in more detail and why you chose the choices you made. And I think you've kind of done that on YouTube a little bit, but I'd also like to share with you why I made the choices I made. And I think it's great because very much what you said is true. It's the personality of your kid and what you want to be doing. So if you don't mind, I'll just give you a brief summary of the bikes I have.
Yeah, let's do it.
So what we have is I have the Honda XRs. I have an XR70. It's a 2000. I have an XR80 and an XR100. And so these are the older ones. These are the styles. So my XR80 and the 100 are from the 90s. So they're your older style bikes. They're kickstart, 4-stroke. They're just real mellow trail bikes. And then we also have a PW50 that was given to us. And so both boys started on the PW50. And I have one boy,
and that's a Yamaha.
My oldest.
For anyone listening, the PW50 is made by Yamaha. It's the littlest one.
Yes. And I would say for anyone thinking about a PW50, this is just something to consider with it. It's really a in your backyard kind of bike, and smooth trail, gravel road, very beginner terrain, very, very beginner. It doesn't have hardly any suspension. It's a centrifugal clutch, so meaning there's no gears. And so it's very limited to what it can do. It's 10-inch tires, so the tires are very small. So it really works the best. We've had the most success with it in our backyard with the kids riding in a circle.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's just getting them going. And so the reason that I went with the Honda XRs, and I kind of like to work on bikes. So the 80 and the 100 were both project bikes that I bought that needed a lot of work. I got them cheap. I paid $600 for the 80, and I paid $300 for the 100. And so the 100 was a true project bike. So to be full disclosure, there's $1,500 total into that bike to make it, but it's mechanically fresh all the way through and through. The 80 is similar. So even though I paid $600 for it, I updated it. They both had points in them. So breaker points are your old style ignition system that degrades as you ride. So the late model Hondas, if you find an ignition system, you can put that on there. So I've got money into those bikes, fixing up. But I kind of like that. I learned a lot from it. I think the benefit to that is if you're the kind of dad that likes wrenching on motorcycles and you need projects to do, that's something to think about, is fixing one up, because then you learn all about it. You learn about the maintenance. You learn what breaks. You learn how to take care of them. So that's just something that's personal for me. What I like about those bikes is they're quiet. My boys seem to they like the quiet 4-stroke. They're easy to ride, lots of low end torque. They're not real zippy. They're not going to be great on a motocross track by any means. They're not race bikes. These are just going out, having fun in your backyard, having fun on your local trails, fun trail ride. That's what they're for. And they go through very little gas. It's an air filter, lubing the chain, and an oil change maybe once a season, and you're good to go. And that's kind of why I went that route with those. It's easy, it's low maintenance, and it's easy for the kids to learn how to ride. The XR80 and the 100 have real transmissions. They're clutch, 5-speed transmissions. The XR70 is an auto transmission, so it's a 3-speed auto clutch. So it's kind of the next step from the PW50.
Yeah. So how old were your kids? How old would you recommend? I have some thoughts about this, but the PW50, when's the best time to kind of start a kid riding as far as age and height or weight? Or do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I would say it depends on the child. So like you said before, it really depends on the child. And so what's interesting is if you go read the Yamaha, it comes with a book. It's like maybe you've seen this, Kyle, but it talks about readiness for a child. So it talks about several skills that your child needs to do. So I would say if your child can ride a bicycle without training wheels and they listen to you most of the time, which I think everybody with kids knows they don't always listen to you, but
right.
They need to be able to you need to size up your child. Can they hold the bike up? Can they stand there and hold the bike up? I started our kids on that PW50 when they were 3. And I would say that that's pushing the envelope big time. It came with training wheels. I don't recommend those. I know a lot of guys use them. They're kind of dangerous because they can hit stuff. I had them, so I tried them. I wouldn't use them again. I think just wait a little bit, let them ride their bicycle, let them get used to balance and stuff. And then what I did is when he started riding the PW50 when he was 3, I tied a rope there's a bar underneath the fender. I tied a rope to it and hung onto the rope because I could actually overpower it. If he started to accelerate away from me, I just grabbed the rope. So I started him at 3, and I just let him putt around a little bit out front with a throttle set screw in it. It comes with a throttle set screw, so you can really tune it down. What are your thoughts on that, Kyle? That's kind of where I was at with it.
No, I love it. I think that 3 is probably about as young as you'd ever want to do. And I wrote, before you said anything about training wheels, I wrote it down on my paper right here because I do have pretty strong feelings about this. Now, just because Kyle and Scott say they don't like training wheels on bikes, that doesn't mean that you're a bad dad if you decide to do that or if you did that. Yeah. So I'm not trying to put anybody in shame or anything, but I believe that if your child still is on training wheels on his pedal bike, they're not ready for a dirt bike yet. There are just enough things that they're going to be dealing with. I think that they need to be able to ride their pedal bike without training wheels. In fact, I think training wheels are a huge crutch altogether. I've got 4 kids. I have learned training wheels are not good.
Same thing, Kyle.
The better thing to do is to get them a Strider bike, which are not expensive now. You can get them for less than $100. I've got my 3-year-old daughter is on her Strider bike. I did training wheels on my oldest daughter, and she couldn't ride a bloody pedal bike until she was past 6 years old. And then with the boys, I got this Strider bike, and I had a 2-year-old rocking a Strider bike, ripping up and down, balancing at 2, and so every kid is a little different. So like my daughter, my youngest now, she's almost striding with it, and she just turned 3. So every kid's going to be a little bit different, but I'm not thinking anything about dirt bike for her until she can ride a pedal bike full on. And she's not there. So I feel like you get a Strider bike for them to learn the balance. And then the hard transition for the kid is being able to learn how to pedal. And so a trike really, really helps. If you've got a Strider bike for them to get the balance down, and you have a tricycle for them to get this pedaling motion down, then you put them together, and now you've got the kid riding a pedal bike. Once they can ride the pedal bike fine, in my opinion, now we're ready to introduce something else, which is this thing that's going to weigh more than them. And we're going to work on throttle control and brakes. And so for me, it's just this progression. So every kid is going to be different. Some of the kids are not going to be ready for that until they're 5 or 6. And some kids
I want to echo what Kyle's saying here, because what he described is exactly what our family did. We had Strider bikes, and then I tried training wheels for a little bit, because I wasn't going to put my oldest on training wheels like ever. And we bought him his first pedal bike. And then he was upset because he really wanted the training wheels. And I thought, bikes are supposed to be fun. I'm just going to let him have fun. So I put the training wheels on it, and training wheels can cause you to crash. You do things with training wheels that you wouldn't do normally.
It's bad habit. So you create bad habits.
Now I'm big into biking. I mountain bike and I ride dirt bikes, and I love both sports a lot. And I find they complement each other. But pedaling a bike makes you stronger for motorcycle riding. So it's going to help your child be stronger for motorcycle riding too.
Absolutely.
And so it's a good thing. And another plug out there, not just for Strider, but for balance bikes, is if you're camping or if you're out, want to go for a neighborhood walk, now your 2-year-old can go with you on that walk, because they can ride that Strider bike. And Kyle, you've got 4 kids, so you know this. You can go for a walk around the block, and that kid can ride that Strider bike because they can go further.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Yeah. I think as soon as I was introduced to the world of Striders and saw how fast the kids progress, I threw away training wheels. I mean, and I would never use another set of training wheels. I think that was from an era where we didn't have another solution. But as soon as you take the pedals off the bike and the kid can actually just walk around with it, it will supercharge their ability to ride a bike and to balance. And that's what we want.
Yeah.
So then we move in. What we did with the bikes, the first one that I had, I didn't actually do the PW50. This next time around, I will. So it's funny that you said, well, it was interesting to see the things that you did. I've learned some things, and I wouldn't do them all the exact same the second time around. Now, this is a caveat because every kid's going to be a little bit different, but I didn't get, the smallest bike that we got was a Honda CRF 50, which is just the upgraded version of your XR, the XRs, the 50s, the XR50. Okay. So it's a CRF 50F. That's what Honda makes now. They've been making it since like 05 or something. And we started with that. It's a kickstart bike. It has 3 speeds. You don't have to have a clutch. And so we started with that. And those are bulletproof, and they're awesome. They cost around $1,500 new. You can buy them, or $1,300 to $1,500. You can buy them a couple years old for around $1,000, or even $700 to $1,000. And the funny part is they hold their value. Once those bikes get to about $700 or $800, they don't really get any lower than that. So let's say you go out and you buy a 2 or 3 year old Honda 50, or even the Yamaha TTR 50. Those bikes will depreciate to a certain point, and then they'll hold the value forever. Essentially.
Yeah. So like to comment on what Kyle's saying there, I have a 2000 XR70 here, and the thing is in perfect condition. I mean, so I would say that with those, and they haven't changed them. really. They haven't changed the design of that bike very much. I think they make a bigger displacement now. I think it's a 110 instead of a 70.
Yeah.
But for you guys out there looking for a used bike like that, condition is almost more important than age,
Exactly.
I would say.
You don't have to care about the years. You just want to see.
You don't need to, yeah.
Yeah.
And the big thing when you're starting out is throttle, and you want them to be able to understand throttle control. That's kind of the biggest thing. And you want them to know what to do. You want them to get that muscle memory down of using a throttle, is what I found was probably the first big step, and stopping, how to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, we did an electric bike in there, and the electric bikes bring on a whole new thing. But the one we got was a cheap one from Razor. And it was okay, but I wouldn't do that one again. I didn't even mention that. But there are going to be some electric bikes now coming up that could be really good options too. The benefit there is it's even more quiet than these bikes that we're talking about, and you can ride them in a park and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another option that people could do as they're kind of getting the kids going. So we went from the CRF 50s, and then I bought a CRF 110F and it's the same thing as what you have on that XR70. It's just they don't make the 70 anymore. They used to make a CRF 70 and a CRF 110. They just dropped the 70 because it was the same frame. I think it was even the same motor. Just they punched it out more for the 110. So they're like, there's no reason to have the 70. So we went to that 110, and I had that for my daughter. My boys were riding the little 50s, the CRF 50s, and my daughter was older, and so I had the CRF 110F for her, and that was a great bike. And I then thought my boys needed something faster, because what I noticed was on the CRF 50s, they'd be riding around and they're bombing around, and I would ride behind them, and I would notice how they would hit like a little bump, and the suspension, there's not a ton of suspension there, and it literally would just disrupt the chassis so much. I watched my kids crash a couple of times because they were riding faster than the bike would let them. And so I would definitely do the CRF 50 or the TTR 50s again. But then I jumped them straight to these KTM race bikes. They were the KTM 50s. So now we moved from a 54-stroke that was gentle and could kind of putt up any hill and gave them a ton of confidence, but the suspension was kind of lacking. And then I jumped them to these KTM 50 race bikes, which were my least favorite bikes that I've had so far.
Okay.
And it was good because, well, it was good in one hand because the suspension was now able to handle bigger stuff and harder stuff and faster stuff, but the bikes were like an on-off switch on power. And so it went from, we were having fun on trail rides on the CRF, the Honda 50s, the little 4-strokes. We were having fun on the trail rides, and they could go up any hill they wanted. If they just clicked down into first gear, it would climb anything, and they were having a blast. And then we moved them to these race bikes, which were fun on the flat stuff because all of a sudden they had tons more power and they could go faster. But as soon as we start doing trail rides, they had some challenges, and we actually took a step backwards in their confidence in the beginning. You know, because all of a sudden now they're riding these bikes that were made to go racing around motocross tracks. And in order to do the same little kind of quasi-technical trails that we were going on before, they had to be going faster. The bike didn't have the low-end torque to go through it slow like they could do on their little Honda. And so now they had to hit everything fast. And there were multiple rides where the boys just came back scared. And they loved the idea of dirt bikes, but then in practice, it became scary and harder. And so I'm not saying that those little KTM 50s don't have a place, or Cobra makes a Cobra 50. I'm not saying they don't have a place in trail riding. I'm just saying that I think if I was to do this over again, I would have just stayed with it, because the boys never really rode that 110. Like the XR70 that you've got and the 110 that I had, the boys never really rode that. But I've watched other kids, and what I've learned is I'd probably do a CRF 110 and then just get the suspension upgraded. Because those bikes, it's a little bit bigger frame. I know they're super heavy, but I think I would just upgrade the suspension on that bike and keep them on those and skip the little KTM race bike if I did it again.
Yeah. See, one of the things that I liked about the XR80 and the 100 is they're light. The 100 is right around 160 pounds. And the 80 is 10 pounds lighter, 150. and you put gas in. I haven't weighed them. I'm just going off of what the internet says, but they're not a super heavy bike, and they have bigger wheels and a little bit more suspension travel. So I think what you're aiming for is, maybe you're not on a race bike, but you're on a bike that does have a decent amount of suspension for a child, and they've got the bigger tires, and it's got a real transmission. So they're learning some great skills. And I'll be honest with you, my 9-year-old wants to putt around in second gear on the XR8. He has just as much. And then after he's been riding for a while, he might go a little bit faster and a little bit faster. So that's why I like those, is they're not super heavy. I think that's one of the things that.
Well, the funny part though, you say they're not super heavy, but they'll weigh 3 times as much as your kid does.
That's right.
They are heavy. If that's the biggest reason why I went with the little 50 bikes from KTM, their little race bikes, is they're half the weight. We're talking
that's
these
true.
bikes would be under 100 pounds or somewhere right around 100 pounds. So they were so much lighter.
Which is 60 pounds lighter than an XR, which is a huge difference. I mean, that'd be a big difference on a big bike.
It's a big difference, and so that's why I went with it. But it just did have some other challenges. And so when we would go camping, if we were just out in like open fields and stuff, the kids loved and had a blast on their little KTM race bikes. But then when I would take them on a trail ride, that's where we struggled, and that's where I'm like, I don't know that I really gained anything by doing that. Even though I bought the bikes that were way lighter and technically faster, it doesn't matter. You can't be full throttle. You're not going 40 you're not going 40 miles an hour on these trail rides. So who cares how fast the bike is? But it's a different perspective, and I don't think there's a right or wrong here. If your kid, and that's the other thing too, you and I are obviously not racers. We're not getting our kids into competitive racing. If you were going to do competitive racing, then you're going to do the race bikes all the way, and
you have to buy the race bikes. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with all that. And that's what I think. I think you just have to look at what you're going to do with it, and what your expectations are for what you're going to ride. And I think what's tough is when you go look at the new Hondas. So if you weighed your 125, your fuel injected 125?
I need to do that right now. In fact, I want to do a full review on the bike, because that's another one. So then we stepped up. My boys are on 65 2-strokes, but I also have a Honda 125F big wheel version for my daughter, and all my boys can ride that. And I think I'm going to do a full review of that bike now that we've had it a little over a year. We might have had it 2 years. Maybe somewhere over a year.
That was the replacement for the XR100 essentially.
Yeah.
And there's weight added with the battery and electric start. Now that's a lot easier. Pushing a button, especially a fuel injected bike, you roll it out. I mean, there's something to be said about your kid just pushes a button and they go. So I think they just got heavier with the newer models than the older ones. But when it's fuel injection and just push a button and go, then that makes life a little easier.
Yeah, yeah, it does, and I've really liked it. The 125F that we've got, and I think I'll do a full review on that. But then I kind of wanted to go back with my boys. We moved off of the KTM 50 SX bikes, and we went up to both the Yamaha and the KTM 65 2-strokes, and those bikes. Oh my gosh, I have loved those bikes. I mean, there have been some times like every once in a while it's hard to start them, because they're kickstart only, but they're super light. And they're on like real dirt bikes. They have clutches. And that was kind of an interesting part. Have you had to work in clutch work with your kids yet?
They do it. My oldest can do it, and he does it well.
How old is he?
He's 9.
And when did he start with it?
And he started with it. He's been riding a clutch since he was 6.
Oh wow.
Yeah. He's been able to do it. He's been able to do it for a couple of years now. And
how did you make that transition? It was something I thought it was going to be a much bigger deal than it was, and now I've taught 3 of my kids to do it, and it wasn't nearly as big of a deal as I thought. But how did you go about moving to the clutch transition?
I just pulled it in. The Honda makes it really easy because when you go to like on an XR80, you can almost dump the clutch and it'll go. It's just about as forgiving as you can get. And so I just would pull it in with him, and we would would start letting it out till you feel it drag. And again, that's the advantage. That's why I like the XR. Not that you can't do this with the race bikes, but the race bikes require you to give more gas as you get going. Where the Honda, you can just start letting it out and it'll start to drag the bike forward, and you just give it a little gas. And we just practiced it, but he picked it up. He picked it up in one day, it seemed like. And, and I think again, it depends on, and I'm not saying that he's anything special. I think kids in general, you just pull it in with them and you just kind of show them how to do it and let them practice a little bit. And then I said, once you're going, pull the clutch in, pull it into second gear and just let it out. And he just did it. And we just practiced it. We went out and practiced it, in front of the house for a couple of days, and he just started doing it. And it wasn't perfect every time. There was a little bit of a learning curve, but after he practiced it a handful of times, he had it down.
Yeah.
So,
it's fun.
Yeah.
It's funny because I thought it was going to be a huge thing. And we had, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, there's so many tiers with this.
Yeah.
Now we come back from rides, and if we come back from a ride, and I've usually got both of my boys. I usually don't. My daughter doesn't come with us a lot. I usually I have to go kind of separate with my daughter because she's 14. She doesn't ride as much as the boys. The boys are 9 and 12, and the boys just thrash their sister, unfortunately. And that's just because she isn't into it. And so I can't really ride with all three of the kids. I have to take either the boys or my daughter. But there's a lot of tears that happen. And if we come back from a ride and no one has cried, I'm going, wow, that was cool.
Yeah.
And but I thought there was going to be a lot of frustration when we moved over to clutch bikes, and I was super worried about that. And we came home with a KTM 65SX race bike, and I showed him in the backyard like 4 times. I was just in the backyard we never ride in the backyard because I live on a quarter acre lot, but I took him in the grass in the backyard, and I kind of reached over them. I wasn't riding the bike with them, but I just kind of reached over them from behind and said, okay, put your finger up on the clutch and let me show you what's happening with my clutch, with the clutch hand and with my throttle hand. And I showed it to them about 4 or 5 times with them on the bike so they could actually see what I was doing. And then I said, okay, you try it. And they basically dumped the clutch like you talked about. And even though it was this 65 two-stroke, the 65 two-stroke has enough torque that they can just pop the clutch and it'll just go. Like it's almost hard to kill those, especially if you give any throttle at all, you just boom, dump the clutch and it goes. So they did that a few times in the backyard. I'm like, okay, let's go for a ride. We put all their gear on because at that point they were just in the backyard with boots. All I did is I made them wear boots. We didn't even have a helmet on. We might have.
Yeah.
But the point is we were on soft grass, and I'm like, we're just going to do a couple stops and starts. Then I put them in their full gear, and we just go out onto a gravel road, and boom, they picked it up. And they stalled a few times, but especially if you're on a gravel or a dirt road, you can almost dump any bike or dump the clutch on any bike, and it'll spin the tire if it needs to and then go, and you just kind of let them. And what I've noticed is that they'll be dumping the clutch, and then you start working with them the next few rides and be like, hey, let's let the clutch out a little slower and let's get more smooth. And it doesn't take very long, and they get more and more smooth with it. The tricky part that I've noticed on the Honda though is the 125F. We've got a 2019 Honda 125F. The clutch doesn't actually engage until the lever is a long way from the bar. And that's hard. Yeah. That's hard for the kids with little hands. Is if you can try to adjust that so that the clutch engagement happens, so it's not all the way out, it might make it a little easier for those little hands. Yeah, one of the things that helps a lot that I did on the older bikes is I just replaced the clutch cable. That does a lot. It's amazing when you get one that it got a lot of time on it. Put your clutch cable on. It's $20. And it makes it easier. But yes, you're right. The KTM has the KTM have the hydraulic clutch on it. Yeah, they're hydraulic. Yeah. So that's helpful because it engages it right away, right off the bar, right? As you start to let it out. Yeah, they're pretty good that way. But even the Yamaha that we've got, this YZ65 is a standard, a steel braided clutch, and it's actually easier to pull than the KTM, and I think it's because of the springs that they have inside the clutch. But I 100% get a new clutch cable. if it's if it's an older bike or whatever, it's such an easy maintenance item, and it could make it's a huge difference. You got to realize your kids don't have the strong hands that you do,
Yeah.
And then lube the clutch point, put some grease up on any of those pivot points so that thing isn't so stinking hard to pull.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's, just going through that what I found is kids learn pretty fast. There's, it's kind of like you were saying now, like I taught my wife to do it when we first met because she rides with us too. And it took a lot longer to get her to figure it out as an adult.
Had she ever driven like a stick shift in a car or a truck?
No, she'd never done that before. So it was just getting that rope memory down. It's kind of like getting that rope memory down, learning to grab the clutch and learning how to let it out. And I think adults in general, if you didn't grow up doing it, it takes a little bit more practice to get there. But I think a dirt bike clutch is more forgiving than a car clutch anyway, because you're, just generally speaking, because you have a lot less weight you're dealing with, and there's oil in there, so you can let it slip longer, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I grew up. I was driving stick shifts when I was like 6, on the farm, trucks and tractors and things. So I laugh. It always surprises me when I meet people that are my age, and I'm like, wait, you've never driven a stick shift? But a lot of cars don't have it anymore. It's been a while since we've even had a vehicle that had a stick shift. So you got to go out there and get a sports car or something. And then even most of those don't have them. So.
Yeah. And I learned to do this when I was 5 years old. So when I was 5 years, as long as I can remember, I've always known how to do a dirt bike clutch.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just something I had to kind of refine my skills a little bit when I started riding about 20 years ago, really riding seriously. But yeah, I always knew, so it wasn't like I had to learn this new skill, but I think but for kids, I think you spend a little time with them, just like I had a very similar experience to what you had. That's basically how I did it too.
So let's talk about, we've talked about the bikes a little bit. Let's talk about, your idea. This is actually the one where you caught me on the email. So I get a lot of email from people and people have different ideas or, hey, this podcast, that podcast. The reason why I emailed you back was this bullet point. You said, lower your expectation on how much riding you'll do. Maybe discuss the added stress of always looking out for your kids, which is much different than riding with the guys. I know we talked about that a little bit, but let's kind of expand on that a little bit. What did you mean when you said lowering your expectations on how much riding you're going to do with your kids?
So when I go drive somewhere to go for a ride, and I got riding areas half an hour from my house up to 2 or 4 hours, I get there, I want to ride. I throw my gear on, we're going, the whole day is about riding. And we're going to ride until we can't ride anymore, and we're coming back to the truck, and we're going to come home. That's the typical, when I would go, the guys that got me into riding, it was always a 4 hour. We didn't just putt around the gravel pit. We got on the bike, we rode trails, and we went out, and it was always serious. It was always all day, and we were going to make the most of this. What I meant by lower your expectations is you might get you're going to spend a lot of time loading up all the bikes, because now you're not just dressing yourself, you're dressing other little people. You're not just worrying about your own bike, but you're going to start one, maybe 2 more bikes, or in my case, it's 2 more bikes, or I'm going to maybe have a kid ride with me and then watch another kid. And so there's a lot more to do. So you're going to it's a lot more effort to load up. It's a lot more effort to get there.
I'm just laughing because I'm going, yeah, yep.
and it's more maintenance. It's more, and it feels like 10 times the gear. And it's, even though it might be one other person. And then if your wife comes with you, that's another person that's riding with you. So you have all these considerations to deal with, and it's a lot more work just to get there. Then you get there, and your son or daughter is like, they're really good for an hour or so. And then depending on how tough the train is, so you start riding and all of a sudden they're tired, or they have a little wipeout and they're shooken up. And I think we could, as dirt bike riders, we can all kind of agree that, hey, if you have a little wipeout, it might take you a little while to recover from it before you're ready to just jump back on the bike again.
Yeah.
So you get there and it's like, okay, I want to go ride this. I'm thinking in my mind, we're going to go do this. We're going to go ride all day. We're going to go ride. Their kids are going to outride me. And really what you find is you get out there and a half an hour later, they're tired, they're hungry, they're thirsty. And you're like, man, the bike just warmed up.
Exactly.
And now you're stopping and you're doing snacks and food and maybe there's tears. There's always tears. Yeah. I don't know that we've ever gone dirt bike riding and not have crying. I'm like, is every parent's experience like this? I mean, I would have done anything to be taken out and go riding as a kid. And here I'm like, these kids got these awesome bikes that I dreamed about forever. And all this, and we're out here and they're crying. There's no crying in dirt bike ride. The last time we were out riding around it was sand dunes, but there was a hard pack area. And my youngest is crying. And I'm like, why are you crying? I don't know. Just ride. And he's telling me he's crying, but he can't stop. He doesn't know why. And I'm like, okay. So you might, as a dad, come out there and ride in a little circle with your son or daughter for an hour, and that might be all you get to do. And I think being happy that you're out there together and realizing that, hey, this is going to be your best friend later for riding. This is your family. It's an investment in your family. So it's more about the experience of going out there and less about the full-on, I'm riding with the guys for 4 or 5 hours.
I loved what you just said, because the word investment is the word that I've used and thought of, and I have to remind myself. You just said it's an investment in your future, and that is 100% what this is. You are investing in your future and your future relationship with your family, whether it's a daughter or whether it's a son. The times that you go out there and you drove that hour or whatever it was, half hour, whatever it was, and you go out there and you get this little ride in, you're just putting small investments in your brokerage account for the future. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And eventually there's going to be enough money in that brokerage account where you can actually start to draw on that, but you're just building it up and it's investing in the future, and it's going to take baby steps. But I'll tell you how, and I'm starting to see this. So just, what day is it? Is it Wednesday today? Wednesday. So on Monday, on Memorial Day, the whole family wanted to get out and kind of like kick off summer. We didn't go camping over the weekend, but we decided to go to kind of do this dirt bike hike thing. So I was going to take the boys dirt biking on this little loop, and my wife and 2 daughters were going to try to hike a little bit of it and just have a fun time. And I said to my wife, I'm like, well, let me just take the boys up this. I had kind of like a little loop in mind. And I'm like, let me just take them up the trail a little ways. And I said, I don't think they're going to be able to do this. I don't think they're going to love the bottom part, but not the top part. So just let me take them up there a little bit. Maybe we'll ride for like 10 minutes, like you just said, Scott. And then we'll come down and we'll just take off our gear and we'll go on the hike with you. Well, I take the boys up a little bit and I get them through one section. And then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to push them up. I'm going to push them up this hill and do this loop. And I know I might be in for it. And I had ridden that trail like 3 days before by myself, but I'm just blitzing along, in second gear, third gear, not even thinking about it. Well, the point of the story is the boys absolutely totally shocked me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you put in all this effort with them and it's going to take years and everything, but then all of a sudden you're going to get to a point where they will start to surprise you. Yeah. And all of those, line upon line that they've been building, and skill stacking on top of skill, and confidence. That's another huge thing, is confidence stacking on top of confidence. And then you get to this point where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that thing that they just went on. Like you have that, your heart skips a beat. You're like, wait a second, holy crap. This trail is really skinny and there's that kind of slough off area and it's 20 feet down and they just stand up on the pegs and they go through it. And I see it in my head. I'm watching the kids right behind them and I'm going, please just trust your skills and just go through it. And I watch them stand up and go through it. And your heart is so full. You're like, I cannot believe you just did that. And you're just like, wow, I need to stop underestimating you, because we coddle our kid, and coddling is not the right word, but you kind of nurture them and you help them to have fun and you build it slowly. Then you get to a certain point where you can start making withdrawals out of that future brokerage account because they're actually going through it and they're doing it. And that is so rewarding. And it was just 48 hours ago right now to where I'm up on the mountain with the kids and I couldn't be prouder. I couldn't be happier. And yes, I went, awesome, it was Kyle. A slow ride. It was, for me, it was a super short ride and we did this loop, but it was the most rewarding ride I've probably done in 3 months or 4 months because I'm finally getting to see the benefit of some of that work we've put in.
Yeah. And I just, that's absolutely true. My kids would do the same thing. And I think one of the things where, you know, when I look back at lessons learned is go at their pace and be happy that you're out there together and have that good attitude and not get frustrated. And I think for all the dads out there listening to this, you can have the greatest intentions in the world. And it's easy for me to say it. I think it's easy to say, don't get frustrated. But then when you're there in the moment, it's a weekend, you've made all the effort to get out there, it's hard to live it out. But I think you don't want to ruin the fun. You want to remember you're out there for fun. And there was a guy that I've known that I've ridden with a couple of times. And he's one of those guys that just had a natural talent for riding motorcycles. He invites me over to his house and he was riding a Honda 450R. And he rode a wheelie all the way down his driveway, and I'm looking, I told him I wasn't I'm like a C-class rider, just a trail rider. And he goes, no, I don't care. It doesn't matter how good you are. Just come over and have fun with us. And he had a motocross track and this guy could clear all the doubles and triples and had a big ramp and was doing stuff that the pros do. And super cool guy. But what he told me, and the reason I bring up the story is that when he was a kid, his stepdad recognized early on that this kid could ride and he could ride good and he was going to push him, and he pushed him and pushed him and pushed him, and he took all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
And he pushed back on his dad and didn't want to ride anymore. So his dad sold the bike and he didn't ride for a while because it created so much conflict because the dad saw the talent and tried to push him to be more than he wanted to go. And what he told me was a few years went by and his dad shows up with a bike in the truck, went out and bought him a brand new bike and rolled it out of the truck and said, here you go, have fun. Just no pressure. Go ride. I know you like to ride. Have fun at your level. And that's what I got to remember, that when I'm riding, that I got to ride it at their level. And with this COVID thing, all of our riding areas got shut down. So there was no riding. The Desert 100 that we like to go to got canceled. Memorial Day weekend is always I've gone and ridden the Poker Run. There's an organized event that's got a kids course and all that stuff.
Which state are you in?
I'm in Washington State.
Okay.
So I live in Western Washington, so we ride the mountains, and there's a couple of riding areas around us, and there's poker runs and stuff like that we'll do. And we don't do a lot of that, but I like to do the Shelton Valley Poker Run, and I like to do the Desert 100. And we, so that stuff all got canceled. So we started just riding in the backyard. And I've got like a half acre, so we don't have a big backyard. It's a grass, and it's a little bit of a slope to it, but we've got basically a track burned into our grass. And I'm out there this weekend with the two boys, and we're just putting around on the little bikes, and they're having fun. And we rode for an hour, and that was good. And they had a great time. And I'm just out there riding with them, having a good time. And I just got to remember that, hey, that's what this is all about. So yeah, so just to keep it fun. That's the big thing, is just keep it fun. And that's what I really meant about lowering expectations, is lowering your own expectations so that you're having fun regardless, and your attitude is good regardless, and you're building up your voice, because it's just like what Kyle's saying. At some point, those kids they're going to be waiting on you, so.
Yeah. I loved all of that. I could echo all of that. And even just like with getting the kids ready for, in the beginning, you're going to be putting their boots on because they won't be able to snap their boots. You're going to be lacing their helmet because they won't know how to do it. You're going to be doing all of these things. And so you will be dressing, 2 people or 3 people or however many kids you have. But slowly it'll get better to where it's like, okay, they can do their own helmet now. And oh, they can, strap their own boots now and they can do these things. But I look at the rides with my kids totally different as opposed to the rides where I go out with my buddies or myself. And you just have to have that expectation. We're going to go out and we're going to ride as a family, and we're going to have fun and we're going to enjoy it. But I'm not going to get my fill of riding. It isn't.
Yeah.
And so you go into it knowing that if you have your expectation of like, I'm not going to get my fill of riding today, then you won't be so let down. And so it's all, sometimes it's all about setting the right expectations. So let's talk about, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's go to the next. Yeah, let's go to the next one.
I wondered about communications. So I don't know what your experience has been with this, because I've tried a couple different now options. I've done it with no communications. I'm talking about helmet communications. Have you done any helmet comms? What's your thought on that?
I have not. The only experience with it was a long time ago, like 18 years ago, when I first got into riding. We rode with a guy who was an ex-military communications guy, and he built some radios. So this is like early 2000. He built some radios that worked like the ones you have. Put it in your helmet, and it had a kill switch button, and they worked really good. And I don't, but you couldn't buy the stuff like you can today. And I don't have anything with our kids today. I don't use anything. So kind of what we do is when we're all riding together, my wife will usually lead. So we'll stop at each intersection. So that's kind of the rule that we have is, hey, if we come to an intersection, we always stop and wait and regroup. And then we talk about where we're going to go. And I usually ride in the back and follow in case somebody has a problem. I can stop and help. So that's really what we do. I was kind of hoping you were going to like one of those communication systems so I could buy one that worked good.
Yeah. So, I do like, well, I should use the term, I should clarify what I mean by like. I love that. I love the idea of having, if you had, and if I go out with guys or like other people and we have our kids, we will generally put, the big person in the front. Actually now my boys will just lead, but it is good to have somebody behind to clean up because you never know what's going to happen. Like a kid will have a problem somewhere and the bike can tip over and it can be on top of them and they need some help. And so it's always best to have somebody playing cleanup. And so now usually when I'm going with the boys, I am playing cleanup. I'll let them lead because if it's just me and them, I'll let the boys lead and I'm playing cleanup to make sure that everything's okay. It's not a good idea to just get out there and go away from the boys. You can in lead. You can do that if you have helmet comms. And if you're always staying in communication, that's one of the best. That's one of the good things about having helmet communications is you as the dad can be out in front, and if it's not too dusty, you can say, "Watch what I do." Problem is, a lot of times it's so dusty they can't watch what you do anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well just talk about things and get behind them. So the communication stuff, I tried the Sena Evo 20S headsets, and I hated those as long as the day. It was hard to get them to connect. It's one thing if you're just connecting one person. It's like you and your one kid, they connect okay. You start getting more than, two people and then they're not great and they lose connection all the time. And if you lose connection with one person, a lot of times you lose connection with the rest of the group. So I did not like the Senas. What I'm using right now are the Cardo Pack Talk Duo or the Pack Talk Bold. And then I got the Duo, which is just two in the pack, and then I had to buy a third one. Actually, somebody else bought me a third one, but thanks, Garrett, for doing that. But anyway, the Cardo Pack Talks are much better because they have more of a mesh technology where everyone is connected to everyone at the same time. And so if I lose connection with one son, I still have comms with the other one as long as I'm within line of sight. And they're all the little in helmet comms are all basically just line of sight. I've gone riding with other guys where it's just kind of like an actual radio pack, like kind of like a walkie-talkie, and those will work a long ways away, and it doesn't have to be line of sight. And so if you were with your riding buddies and you thought, well, I need to have communication with people, and I want it to work over a mile or two, or probably the radio comms would be a better bet, but you don't generally put that in your helmet. I guess you can get an earpiece that goes in there.
Yeah.
But we've been using the Cardos and they work really well. They've just basically connected every time we turn them on, all three of the headsets. They're kind of a pain to get installed in the helmet, and I when I was putting him in the helmets, I don't like doing that. You're trying to get the wires in there, and the kid helmets are a little smaller, and the cheek pieces and stuff don't want to go in as well. And then if the ear, the little microphone or the speaker thing isn't exactly in the right place, they won't be able to hear. And so it can kind of be frustrating to get them started. But now that we've got them working, it is a benefit, and it's expensive because it costs about $250 a helmet. So their freaking comms are probably more than their helmet. And you might be able to get them for cheaper, but the benefit is this: I can give them real-time feedback on what they're doing right now. And I can be like, I was doing this just 48 hours ago. I'm like riding behind my 9-year-old. I'm like, hey, buddy, kick your toe in, point that toe in. And he finally then had his foot get ripped off the bike twice in like 10 seconds or something. And I'm like, see, your foot got clipped off the bike. That's why I'm telling you to put your toes in. And I'm like, and then on that one rock you hit, you're just going to have to lift your foot. On that one that you hit, and I'm able to tell him this literally when it's still fresh in his mind. It happened 2 seconds ago. And I'm like, buddy, next time you see a rock like that, you're going to have to raise your right foot. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so the real-time feedback is pretty cool. And so I don't want to use them with my riding buddies, but having them with the kids, if you have the option, because it's expensive, all this is expensive, but if you have the ability, the Cardo Pack Talks are pretty good, and it does give you a little bit of an advantage because then you can provide that coaching in real time. And you can also make sure they're still having fun. I can't tell you, it's such a mental thing where you can say, hey guys, isn't this so fun? Isn't this a blast? And if you do that in the middle of the ride, it's kind of like you're reinforcing that fun idea.
Yeah, we're actually having fun out here.
Yeah, remind them that you're having fun. And then if something happens where they're not having fun, like if they tip the bike over, I can be like, do you need help? And I can tell if they don't answer right away, it's probably because they're working up to a cry, and you can be like, hey buddy, just breathe. We're going to be okay.
A couple things just to kind of build on that, Kyle, and I wrote a note down here, is kids, you know how when you start to bonk as an adult, it's kind of a degradation. It happens a little slower. Kids have a tendency to go off cliffs.
Yeah.
And so what I've noticed with like my 5-year-old, when he was riding his 50 in a trail, we were riding, we were going around, and all of a sudden, the difference was one lap. And this wasn't a big area, but he starts to lose it. And I think he was having a lot of fun. He didn't want to stop, but he finished that lap, and then he just fell over and laid there. And he was done. He wasn't going to ride out. I had to walk back down there and push the bike home because he was just done. And so kids can have a tendency, and I don't know if you've noticed this with your kids, but they tend to go off cliffs. And the one thing my wife was saying to make sure I mentioned is snacks, all capital letters.
Nice.
So snacks. So take lots of food and snacks and feed them more than you think you might need to. Before they're hungry, maybe here's a bar, here's a pack of trail mix or something, because
and hydration.
Take water and just make sure you're feeding them with things they want to eat that are going to give them energy. Because once they bonk, it's a bummer. So
yeah, it can happen. It can happen to people too. I've ridden with people where they hit like an emotional, physical energy wall, and you're done. And like you said, the kids are kind of like the old. You remember the old, well, it's not old, we still have them, but like an alkaline battery. An alkaline battery is basically made so that it will put out its full output until it gets down to a certain point, and then boom, it just shuts off. Yeah. It doesn't like slowly taper off like the old nickel cadmium. Now we're dating ourselves. Like the NiCad batteries, the nickel cadmiums. Yes. They would kind of like slowly get lower. But if you have the kids are like they're on, and then they drop off the cliff like you're talking about. And so it's good for, not literally, but their energy level just like all of a sudden drops. And so it's important to have water, hydration. What I've started to do with my boys the last few years is I make them carry their own packs. I'm like, okay, you've got a riding pack. We're going to make sure you've got water in it. You're going to have food in it. I'm carrying all the tools. But I make them carry jackets. And that's another thing. I'm like, guys, look at the weather. Let's look and try to decide what we're going to do. we can always put a pack, we can always take a layer off, or you can tie it around your waist, or you can put it in your pack, but we can't put a layer on. And so you're teaching them all these things. You're trying to teach them to be present and have, emergency preparedness and just general preparedness. Guy, you're going to need a drink and you're going to need a snack. So let them pick it and let them carry it. And I think that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's it. And that's one of the things that could make the real difference in your experience is snacks and water. And then one of the other notes I had on here is consider the bike you're riding behind them. And like, I know like on a couple of the bikes, like I know like the KTM XCW, the 300 XCW, one of the comments that I've heard a lot is first gear is just kind of unusable because it's super slow. However, if that's the only bike you have and you have a little son or daughter that you're going to ride with on a PW50 and you're going to go putt around camp with them or putt around the yard with them, that seemingly unusable first gear for normal adult riding might be useful to practice your balancing skills and some other things riding slow. So I kind of wrote down here a good ride, a bike that goes slow well might make your experience more fun. And one of the things I saw last year when I was at the poker run event that we do over Memorial Day weekend is I saw this dad following a PW50 on the kids course, and he's on his Yamaha WR450. And he just looked like he was hating life.
The bike's going to be overheating.
The bike's just, because that PW50 goes so slow for that big thing. And it's just, he just looked so frustrated. And here I am, I've got an XR200. And that XR200 it's one of those bikes that's incredibly entertaining to ride if you don't take yourself too seriously when you're on it. If you're just playing around, having fun, there's no suspension on that thing. It's really only good up to third gear. It's got a 6-speed transmission in it for some reason.
But there's not enough power to pull it in the higher gear. There's not enough power
to even pull it. But in first gear, the thing's almost like a child's bike. And so I'm out riding that thing around with my kids. It's super quiet. It's the quietest bike we own by a long shot. It'll literally go an entire summer on a tank of gas. So that's not my bike that I ride.
And he's not exaggerating, guys. You might think he's exaggerating. No, you only put gas in those types of bike like once a summer, because
once a summer.
It's actually ion technology where it's actually like maybe it's hydrogen. Maybe it's a hydrogen fuel cell, because they don't actually burn the gas that you put in the tank.
They don't burn the gas. I don't even understand. You could do 200 miles on that thing. And I ride that bike all the time with the boys, especially if I live in a neighborhood. So in the backyard, I'll pull that thing out and ride that around with the kids. It's got a super soft seat on it. So when you're sitting on, because a lot of times you might have a little kid ride with you, so that's sometimes what I'll do is I'll have my youngest would ride with me when he wasn't ready to ride. Well, you can't stand up when you have them with you. So you just sit on that thing and cruise behind, because you're riding sweep and your support group. So you're sitting on it. So I guess that goes back to lowering your expectations. Hey, you might be just sitting on something like that putting. And so consider that. I mean, an XR200 you can find, so they don't come up all the time, but when you find them, they're $1,200 will get you one that runs great. For a good condition one, it could be $1,200. For a bad condition one, it could be $600. So if that's something just to, and there's a lot of choices there, Kyle. I mean, there's PTRs, but think about the idea of having maybe if you can, if it's an option for you to have something like that. I mean, I paid $1,000 for that bike and it was in really good shape.
Yeah.
I actually got it with the XR70, and it's a cool follow kids around bike, cause I'm going to go say, I can't go fast on it. So,
and you don't need to.
And I don't need to.
Yeah,
and that's
it's such a good point, because you're going to have more fun on the XR200 playing sweep with your kids than you are on your 450. Your 450 race bike or whatever. It's not going to be fun. You will have more fun on a bike that you can take yourself a little less seriously, or a little and also that won't overheat. So if you're going to, if you can't afford two bikes and you do have a bigger like 450 motocross bike, or maybe like a KTM 500 EXC or something like this, install a fan on the bike, because you're going to be going so slow that the thing is going to need more air pulling through the radiator. And and just, that's a nice thing. The XRs, that's you're talking about an air-cooled bike. If you could find, like, let's say you've got your high-performance race bike and you're like this Mr. Bad A or whatever, you're going to spend a lot of money on these bikes with the kids, the littler bikes. It might be a good idea for you to get a low maintenance, 4-stroke, low compression, just something that is easier, that isn't going to overheat so much, just to go with them and play sweep. So I love that idea. I haven't done that because I've always just had all these different bikes kicking around, but I don't take, like, when we were doing the really slow stuff, I wouldn't take certain bikes. Now with my boys on the 65s, they're ripping, and I can take any bike. I can take any bike that I want. But in the early days, that's a really good idea that I didn't do. But I also wasn't riding a lot of 4-strokes that were overheating. I would ride like a KTM 300 that didn't overheat. You can take a KTM 300 and it won't overheat as long as you're not climbing a massive hill, spinning the wheel.
And that's a good go slow bike in first gear because it's got that really low first gear.
Yeah.
And so if that's the kind of bike you have, the other thing too is like a CRF 150F, that kind of thing, electric start. That was Play Bike of the Year, I don't know, years ago in Dirt Rider. And so some of these little bikes are kind of fun for an adult to jump on and just rip around on.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you're not taking yourself too seriously, and my main bike that I ride is a KDX 220.
Nice.
And so even though that one goes slow, and actually it was Kyle, I had a CR 250 for a long time and I tried to convert to a woods bike. And it was actually watching all your videos that just was like, I got to sell this dumb thing because I'm missing out here. And I had bought the KDX initially for my wife. And every time I rode that, I'm like, I like this better. And it's that less power, more confidence. So some of that's just my personal preference. I know that's not everybody's personal preference, but it's my personal preference that I can actually ride more confidently with less power.
Yeah.
And honestly, that what's interesting about the XR200, for those of you that don't know, is it has a full-size front tire. To me, what makes it more, because I used to have a CRF 150 as well, and the XR200 is kickstart, so there's no battery. It's super low maintenance, but it's that motor that makes all its power on the bottom, and it really signs off. After you get past the mid-rev, there's no top end of that bike. It doesn't rev out like a modern 4-stroke would. Which actually makes it super entertaining for low speed technical trail riding or low speed following children. And so it's got a full size 21-inch front tire with a 17-inch rear tire, and it's a shorter, smaller bike. So I'm 5'11", and I find that bike incredibly entertaining to ride just for messing around on.
Yeah.
So it's just throwing that out there.
Well, yeah.
For those that are.
Go ahead. Finish that point.
Oh, I'm just throwing that out there for those. It's fun to build skills on it. It's fun to play off little objects when you're following your youngster around. So that's why I like that. I just find it incredibly entertaining, and it taught me that I don't need all this power to have fun, and that's why I like the KDX so much, because it's that perfect mix of. It's more. The XR200 is not enough power to go out and ride with the guys. By a long shot, it's not enough power. But the KDX is like that perfect mix. It's like, wow, this thing is really good on the bottom, and it's got plenty of power when I need it. But I'm super confident on it.
Yeah. You made me think of another thing that I do when I'm riding with the boys. That is kind of a fun thing. So you're going to be going slower. You're going to be sweeping with the kids. That gives you an opportunity to slow down and look for fun things to do. When you're out bombing with yourself or bombing with the guys, it's all, there's all this competitive stuff and everyone's trying to race each other and everything. That's the funny thing. People ask me, they're like, Kyle, why don't you race? And I'm like, I race every time I'm on my dirt bike. It just isn't in like a sanctioned race where there's going to be some podium at the end. But the whole thing is, when you're riding with your kids, you're going to be going so much slower, and that gives you the opportunity to then focus on some different things. Find rocks to hit things on purpose that you wouldn't normally hit this log, hit that rock. There's that side hill berm thing. And so you can have fun on your dirt bike at any speed. And so just because we said, let's lower expectations, we're not going to ride as much when we're with our kids. That doesn't mean that we don't have fun. So lower your expectations down, and then set your sights on something else. You can say like, okay, I'm going to stand up on the pegs for this entire ride. I'm never once going to sit on the seat. And even though I'm going to be going slow and, I'll have to jump off and help them, but I'm not going to use my seat. I'm going to pretend like my seat, I'm allergic to it, and I'm going to stand the entire time and build the endurance and build my back muscles. Because you can build your back muscles and stuff like that just by having a purpose and say, okay, I'm going to hit every rock that's about the size of my front tire. I'm going to go over there and try to hit it. Just because I'll have time. I can come up, set up for the rock. The boys will go off a little ways. I'll hit the rock, and then I'll go off and I'll catch back up to them. So you can come up with fun things to do. Just because you're with the kids doesn't mean you can't have fun. You're just going to go a shorter distance. The time is probably going to be shorter, but you can still find things to do in the trail. Have you ever thought about that when you're riding?
I do that all the time, and it's funny. Sometimes I'll try to do a stop and just balance a little bit and then try to catch up to them. But then what I find is they stop and wait for me. And I'm like, you guys need to stop and wait for me. Just keep going, Well,
that's where the comms come in. That's what you can say, hey, just keep going, or if you have to pass them for something, for whatever, to show them a line, then you can just tell them, okay, just keep going. We do hand signals too. Like I have a hand signal where I roll my hand, like, keep going. And so I'll use hand signals too, but if you got the comms, then you can be like, hey guys, I'm going to hit this hill right here. You guys just keep going and I'll catch up to you, So.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Well,
was there anything else you wanted to cover here, Kyle?
I think we've covered most of it. I've loved tools. I guess we should talk about tools and emergency prep.
Okay.
So with tools, I carry, that's the other complication is it's now you've got all the other things you have to carry. What I am trying to do and trying to figure out is put like spark plugs. I actually have fouled a couple spark plugs now on the little bikes. I've never fouled a spark plug on a big bike, but I've been carrying now spark plugs for the kids' bikes because every once in a while you can foul them. The littler bikes seem to be a little more prone to that. It's probably a good idea to put an extra lever, a set of levers in your kid's pack, and then put a spark plug in your kid's pack because that's not heavy. And then dad
you're going to want levers. We've broken lever before.
And dad can carry tools. It's one thing for me to ride back with a broken lever, but it can be harder. And we've never actually broken a lever all the way off with the kids, even though I don't have handguards on the bikes, on my kids' bikes, because I'm carrying a fleet of bikes. I have 5 full-size bikes, and then each kid has a bike, and I got 2 trials bikes. So I literally have, anywhere from 5 to 12 bikes at a time because this is my gig now full time. And so I can't put like handguards and everything on every bike, but it's amazing how we haven't actually broken one all the way off, but it's going to pay. Luck favors the prepared. So let's have tools. Let's have a few of these items in our pack or in their packs. And then emergency stuff. I try to carry with me, like ibuprofen. I try to carry with me like a way to stop bleeding. I'm carrying Israeli bandages now. Just in case we have some puncture, somebody gets stuck with something in their shin or something, or their arm. I'm not carrying tourniquets with me, but I'm carrying like an Israeli bandages. And then I'm carrying a GPS, communicator with me. I've always got my cell phone, but not all the time are we in coverage. And so I'll carry a GPS communicator where I could call for an SOS if I needed to. And I just feel like if we're going to get out there very far away from civilization, which we're getting further and further now with the boys, there's that extra, that extra responsibility on us. We are the primary caretakers when we're out there.
Yep.
Obviously, mom isn't there, and you need to realize it's all on you now. And their livelihood, they're trusting themselves with you, and we need to take that responsibility seriously. And we need to maybe soften ourselves just a little bit when we're out there because mom isn't there anymore. I'm trying to raise men. I don't look at myself as raising little boys. I'm grooming men. And so I want them to be tough, but at the same time, it's okay to cry for a little bit. It's okay. Once it gets excessive, then I'm like, okay, let's breathe and let's think about something else we can do. Let's stop crying now. It's been a minute, and let's start breathing now. but you need to maybe soften yourself a little bit because you're the only one there now, you know? And,
yeah, I agree.
And mom has like this nurturing side, and they're tend to, you know, I'm going to come over, I'm going to hold you, I'm going to kiss the boo-boo or whatever. I'm not saying you have to do all that, but what I am saying is just know that this child might be in kind of a traumatic situation that's just happened. They might have just crashed. It was scary. It was traumatic. And it's not always the best for you to just go up there and say, walk it off.
Yeah.
You know, there's a time for saying walk it off, and there's a time for having a little bit of compassion and empathy. And I think if we can walk that line and show a little bit more empathy and compassion than maybe we would otherwise, it can go to build their confidence up. Like I said to the boys the other day, we were up there on this trail ride, and I mentioned to them, you know, if you have to fall, make sure you fall into the hill, because we don't want to fall down this little embankment here, because it was like 25, 30 feet down. And I said, but here's the thing, guys. If the bike starts to go down there, just let it go. I just want you to jump off and save yourself, because I don't care about the bike at all. What I care about is that you're safe. And so if your bike goes down that embankment, I don't care. I just want you to not go down the embankment. And they're like, well, could you fix the bike if it fell off that? And I'm like, absolutely. I could fix the bike. And so I don't care. I don't want you to purposely abuse the bikes, but I'm never going to get after you for crashing, and breaking that part. I'll be like, hey, we got to fix this. And so it's good to set the expectation with the kids. That's something that my dad didn't do as well with me. I was terrified, and my dad will listen to this podcast, so I got to be careful. My dad is an awesome dad, but he taught me, his thing was, if you tip the bike over, you've crashed it. And he will still talk about people, quote, crashing his bike 30 years later, when really it was just tipping the bike over. What I tell my kids is, if we're not tipping the bike over, we're probably not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
And we're going to scratch plastic, and that's okay. And you're going to break off a fender, and that's okay. And you're going to break a lever, and that's okay. It's $8.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're going to break things. We're going to fix them. We're going to do it together. We're going to come home. We're going to clean them up. Teach them how to clean the bike. They need to be washing the bike. Once they get to a certain level, have them out there washing the bike with you and scrubbing it down and hand drying it, and have them help you lube the chain, and have them look at the chain with you. Do we need to adjust this chain? And so you can start to build all these things in there. And it's just, we're building men and women, strong daughters and we're building strong people, and we're having a blast while we're doing it. And I just love it.
So this last bike I bought, the 100, I bought from a guy who had a couple of daughters, and he wanted his daughters to ride because he wanted them to have confidence. And he goes, motorcycles are a fun way to get confidence. And I think you can ride safe, you can be safe, and you can learn a lot of great skills. It's great to learn how to break something, you broke something, how we fix it, because everything can be fixed. And the great thing is that this learning how to work on motorcycles is a great introduction to basic mechanics, because they're not that complicated. So those are all really good skills for your kids to learn as they do this.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Scott, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's actually been really fun. Yeah. I'm sorry it took us so long. Your initial email was, a month and a half ago. But
no, that's okay. I know you're super busy, and I really enjoy watching your videos. I've watched most of them, I think. And I carry a saw with me. So I went and I got a couple of these Corona saws. So I have a saw in my backpack, and I've actually started including the kids on that. So if we see a branch hanging over, we've been cutting it off.
Yeah.
And we talked about that. I just bought a mount so I can mount the chainsaw to my motorcycle, because there's a couple trails that this time of year they have trees over. So one of the things that you kind of inspired me on was we should do a little bit. And your little bit matters, because if everybody just does a little bit, all the trails get maintained.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that's a great time to stop. The kids like helping. I've had the kids with me a couple of times. There was a tree across one of the trails, and we were out there, and I said, hey, let's get this thing cleaned up. So we took the tree, stopped and took a break and cut the tree out of the way. So get yourself a saw, and carry it. And just hand
saw at the least. You can carry a little folding hand saw. It doesn't even have to be that 6, 7, 8, 9 inch blade folded into its own handle. you'd be amazed the things I've been amazed in the last couple of weeks what you can cut out.
Yeah, the little folding Corona saw at Lowe's works really good, and it's $20. And I like the one you have. I'd love to hear a more in-depth review on it.
I've got a couple that I'm trying, and so I'll do some more stuff on them. But it's amazing what you can cut out with these things. You can cut out a 10-inch log. You know, obviously you cut on one side, you cut on the other side, and it might take you a few minutes. And then you can have a chainsaw. Like some guys will carry chainsaws with them. And it's good to have everybody doing that. But if everyone's taking a little bit, and I've been showing it more, just I've done that. I've always cleaned out trails and cleaned things out. Yeah. I don't always do it as much, but I had some people email me or saying like, "What are you doing for our trails? All you're doing is riding them." And it kind of torqued me because I'm like, brother, I'm doing probably just as much as you. It's just I'm not showing it. So now I'm going to start showing it a little bit more because I want to try to set an example for people and be like, hey, look, it's very rare that I go on a ride where I don't pull something out of the trail, where I don't clean up the trail. You know, I would say 85% of the time there's at least once in the ride where I stop purposely to clean something out of the trail that's a safety issue or a potential hazard for people. I'm not looking to make everything easy. I'm just looking for safety issues. You know, it's like somebody might not see that, or that thing ripped my goggles off, and I'm lucky that I still have my eyesight. If somebody comes through here without goggles, they might get their eye poked out. I stop and I'll cut that out.
Yeah. Yeah. You know? And it doesn't take, I mean, if everybody does a little, it just does a little bit. If even half the people did a little bit, then the trails will stay clean. I like that podcast you did with that forest worker from Idaho, because I'm going to take a trip there this summer with a friend of mine, and we're going to ride, and we're going to both buy Idaho tags like we're supposed to now. And that's a good thing, because that money goes to making those trails nice. And so that's kind of the other thing too, that's also good to include them in, because the kids like helping with that stuff. So,
and you're building them. You're setting up that, you know, if you teach the kids this is what we do, then they're going to continue to do that, you know, in their riding, and they'll stop with their friends, and it all perpetuates from there. So yeah. Well, thanks, Kyle. I appreciate you letting me be part of your program. So that's super. That was fun. I wasn't sure if you were going to let me be part of it or just do the podcast yourself. So, oh no, that was cool. The thing is, and if people want to email me, it's Kyle at Dirtbike Channel. If you have podcast ideas, I get a lot of people that email me ideas, but if you are articulate and you have something here, you know, a lot of times what I'll do, and I didn't do this with you, Scott, a lot of times I'll just have a call with people. Some people don't love recording. Like I'll have other people where I'm, hey, can I record this? And they don't want to, and that's totally fine. But I love just, building on ideas with people. Let's face it, a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast or watching my YouTube channel, we all have really similar mindsets, but we have different ideas, and we can, add something to the community. So thanks for taking the time. I did not know how to put two dirt bikes into a 6.5 foot bed and close the tailgate until I saw you do it on Dirt Bike Channel. So there's lots of value in the stuff you're doing. Little things that can help. So okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, Kyle. Yeah, let's keep in touch, and we'll chat soon. Okay, absolutely. Okay. Have a great day. You too. Thanks, Scott. Okay. Bye. So I want to thank Scott for coming on with us. Again, if you guys have ideas for podcasts, you can go ahead and email me. It's kyle@dirtbikechannel.com. If you want to support Dirtbike Channel, one of the best ways you can do that is using my links to Rocky Mountain ATV and Motosport and Amazon. I have them on my website. If you go to dirtbikechannel.com, right now you'll see the links. It's kind of up in the upper right-hand corner. You click on that, and I've got different ideas that you can do. You can even bookmark those. Like that's what I ask people to do is like, hey, grab the actual link and then bookmark that for Rocky Mountain ATV, and that really helps me. Also, if you're listening to this podcast before June 15th of 2020 here, I do have a Dirt Bike Channel sweepstakes that's going on right now. I'm giving away 3 different bikes. We're giving away a 2020 Beta 300RR Race Edition. We're giving away a 2020 Yamaha YZ250 FX. And we're giving away a 2019 KTM 300 XCW TPI. That bike has the most hours on it of all of them. It's got 124 hours on it. It's in the shop right now. We're getting a new top end on that. I'm having Kevin at Moto Experts actually rebuild that thing. The reason why I'm having him do it is then we can go there and I can be like, hey, Kevin, how does the top end look on this bike? What does the cylinder wall look like? Do you think it has more or less wear than you would expect for a bike that has, over 120 hours on it? And so that's a video series, or I don't know how many videos we'll do on it, but we'll have that coming up. So anyway, that's what I've got going on. Hopefully everyone had a good Memorial Day weekend, and we're just starting to get into summer here. Hopefully we can get out of the coronavirus cloud that's been over us as a country and as a nation and as the world. I hope everyone is happy and healthy and safe. And I hope this podcast gave you some ideas of things that you can do with your kids and how you can set that up, and just kind of give you a level set for what it's going to be like if you go out there with your kids. I highly, highly recommend it because I'm starting to see some of the benefits now. It's still a lot of work, but it's becoming less work, and it's becoming more rewarding as we go. So that's the one thing I would say to you guys is this is going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. Make sure it's fun for the kids. And I guess the only other thing left to say is let's leave a single track. Thanks, guys.